Hello, Master Duel Central. How's it going, guys? So today for the video, I wanted to make a tier list of hand traps, and I also am going to call the video How to Beat Sprite. And the reason I'm doing that is because right now, really your best hand traps are the ones that are going to beat Sprite. Sprite is pretty much tier 1. It's everywhere. A lot of people are playing it. Of course, in the best case scenario, you want a hand trap that can deal with Sprite, but also deal with other strategies. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at here for this tier list. We're kind of doing two birds, one stone here. For starters here, I do want to talk about a very interesting card. Ghost Ogre hasn't seen that much play in Master Duel. You see it pop up here and there, but right now, Ghost Ogre is really strong. The reason for that is because if you Ghost Ogre the Gigantic, Gigantic has to detach a material as part of its effect. You do negate the effect, it gets destroyed before the effect gets to resolve and detach a material. So yeah, since it doesn't detach for cost, Ghost Ogre negates Gigantic. It's also just a really good card. Just getting to destroy any card your opponent activates is really strong. Another card that I think is like not as good as Ghost Ogre, but still really solid right now is DD Crow that I'm going to put in pretty good. Now, DD Crow doesn't really interrupt Sprite that much. It really only helps you interrupt the elf, which is still decent because oftentimes they'll make an elf and they'll have their carrot or their red in the grave, and they're going to use their elf to bring back that red, so at least you can get rid of that target. But more importantly, the reason I'm putting it in B tier is because it has applicability in other matchups right now. If you're not playing against Sprite, it's highly likely that you're going to be playing against Mathmech. That's also still quite popular, and Mathmech has a really hard time against DD Crow. You can DD Crow the Diameter to stop them from really popping off with their super factorial. It becomes pretty much useless when you DD Crow the Diameter. So just because of that, I think DD Crow is actually in a decent place in the game. Nothing like, not too amazing, but definitely worth considering. It's definitely a good card. Next up, we have Nibiru. And people in my Nibiru sucks video, like I made a short basically saying that Nibiru's trash, and people are like, oh, you're wrong, you're coping, and they're saying now it's good because Sprite is out. Guys, I just don't get it. Most of the time, Sprite summons a Gigantic before their 5th summon, at least like if they know what they're doing. So I don't really get why people think this card is good again. Like literally, Gigantic makes it so neither you or your opponent can summon anything that's not level 2, rank 2, or link 2. So it just kills Nibiru. So if you go Gigantic before your 5th summon, Nibiru is dead in hand, and it's going to probably stay dead in hand for the rest of the game. So in my opinion, I'm bordering on it's just bad, to be honest. I'm going to put it on eh. It is good in other matchups, like Sword Soul is still a deck you'll see running around from time to time, and of course this is pretty game winning against that. It doesn't do that well against a lot of top decks. Like it doesn't do much against Mathmech. It does very little against Sprite, but it does do, like, you know, the combo decks like Dragon Link, that sometimes they really feel the impact of Nibiru depending on their hand. So you know, I feel like this is a decent spot for it. It's still not, maybe it's not bad, like calling it trash was a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't think it's very good either. All right, this one here is pretty interesting. Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird is, I think, actually quite good. Runic Sprite, in my opinion, is the best variant of Sprite, and I really don't think the ban list is going to change that. We literally lost 2 cards out of our, like, we lost 2 Runic cards out of our deck. Like, it's not that big a deal. We just play 2 carrot, 2 red instead. So yeah, honestly, I'm feeling kind of like it's based. You literally take away the draw engine of Runic Sprite when you activate Droll, because they'll usually search their fountain with the Hugin as their first summon. And you activate Droll, suddenly they can't draw, they can't search, and even against non-Runic Sprite, like let's say they Droll after you search with blue. Usually with blue you'll search Jet, then your Jet is kind of dead because you can't search a starter. So honestly, I think Droll and Lockbird is in a really good position right now. Of course, there's other matchups where it doesn't do as well, but it does have the benefit of like destroying some decks that are not as popular but still like see a lot of play, like Floowandereeze, like, you know, where you don't see it all the time, but you'll see it sometimes. It's really annoying. So Droll and Lock completely kills Floowandereeze. But anyway, yeah, so I just think this card is in a pretty good spot right now. Next up, Skullmeister. Skullmeister negates an effect that activates in the grave, so it's not nearly as good as DD Crow for this current format, because the main use of your DD Crow is going to be to get rid of either Diameter or the elf target. So I genuinely just think Skullmeister is just bad right now. Like, you don't really want to play Skullmeister right now, right? And speaking of bad cards, people used to play Chaos Hunter for the Runic matchup, the pure Runic Floodgate matchup. And yeah, I mean, yeah, this card is just not good right now. Like, you don't really want to be playing this. If you activate this against a a Runic Sprite player, they're just gonna play sprites and you're not gonna have a great time. Yeah, this card is just not good right now. And while we're at it, let's just deal with the other banishing cards here. Lancia. Lancia is better than Chaos Hunter, just because like it's a bit more generic. It hits more decks. You don't have to wait for a special summon to use it, and it just completely shuts out banishing for one turn, right? Of course, it's going to stop your opponent from using the first effect of Runic cards, but in Runic Sprite, like, as long as you can get that level 2 on the field, you can still set up your stuff with the sprites and you'll be feeling pretty nice about it. You know, you'll set up a couple of negates without ever using banishing. So really, I don't think this card is that high impact. So I would say it's just kind of it's definitely like, it's not bad, but you know, it just doesn't it's not really relevant right now. And another card that's pretty interesting, that's like, this card is insanely broken, but it doesn't feel super relevant right now, is Dimensional Shifter. If you activate Dimensional Shifter against like a Sprite player, again, I know I'm saying Sprite a lot, and that's why I wanted to title this video both Hand Trap Tier List and How to Beat Sprite, because a lot of the best hand traps right now are cards that deal with the best deck in the game, right? And this card just doesn't do that. Like, it doesn't really do anything to Sprite. Like, no, that's not true. It does do things. Like, Sprite doesn't like this. They don't get to go into Elf, which sucks, but they also can just kind of set up a couple of negates and call it a day. You know, that like they can still go blue, they can go Jet, search starter, bring out like a negate, use blue and Jet, go into Gigantic, detach Jet gets banished. Oh well, special summon a Carrot, and you have like two really solid interruptions right there. So, you know, it's not like amazing, but you know, it's not bad either. I mean, it also stops your opponent from setting up a Smashers. So like, I don't think there's a world where you can call this card just all right. This card is absolutely broken. It's also just that the decks that can play this card are not that relevant, you know? Like Thunder Dragons can play this, like Despia can play this, and Despia is probably the best one that can play this, but they often just don't. Like Trap decks could play this, and like it's good. It's definitely a really strong card. I'm gonna put it in pretty good. It's just kind of hard to rank because even though it's insanely strong, it's kind of limited by the kind of decks that can run it. So yeah, I'd say it's just pretty good. Next up, we have Red Reboot, and obviously Red Reboot does nothing to Sprite. Very few Sprite players actually playing traps. You just don't see that many trap decks right now. You do have Labyrinth that some people are playing. It's not that common to see Labyrinth in the top ranks though. It is still there, like you can see it, and I guess drawing Red Reboot against those is really nice, but for all those times when you draw Red Reboot and it's completely dead, it's not, I don't think it's really worth running right now. The one thing is, it does kind of win you the matchup against Mathmech oftentimes, and it's pretty useful against Sword Soul too, which are both still like played decks. Like, they're popular decks, not nearly as popular as Sprite, but they're still there. So I'm kind of teetering between either top of or like bottom of pretty good. I think I'm gonna put it at bottom of pretty good because it is just like a game ending card, kind of similar to like Dimensional Shifter, where it's like in the right matchup this card just wins the game, right? So I don't feel like, well, I mean, you could even say the same about Nibiru, but I do feel like this might come up a bit more often than Nibiru in the current format, at least, just because Mathmech is still a very, very strong top tier contender that you can just kind of shut down with this one. So I'll put it in pretty good, but I wouldn't really be against putting it in but I'll put it here for now. And next up, this is a weird one. I don't even know if I want to put this on the list because I almost never see it. I think I've seen this card literally once in all of Master Duel, but Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. If your opponent special summons a monster, you can discard this card to negate that monster's effects. So it kind of works in a similar way to a like Effect Veiler, but Effect Veiler is not once per turn, and honestly, like this card just doesn't feel really good in my opinion. Like, there's a reason you don't see it a lot. It has some applicabilities, it's kind of nice, like it's actually not bad. Like, you can negate a blue, but is that really enough? Like, and doing what Ash can already do, is that really enough? What Veiler can already do, Imperm can already do, is that really enough? I don't know about that, because it also just doesn't really apply to some certain matchups that are not as popular. Like when your opponent normal summons their Uni Zombie, which obviously you don't see all the time, but like you'd much rather have a Veiler in hand, put this like at the bottom of like I could see this being good. If you play this, like, I'm being like, oh shit, like that's interesting. Like, but I don't know, I just don't see it enough, and I think there's a good reason for that. Next up, we have Ghost Bell. I think Ghost Bell is broken. Ghost Bell is weird because a lot of the time what makes Ghost Bell so good is actually just the fact that it can negate Called By. It has other applicabilities, of course, like you can negate Elf with Ghost Bell, but the fact that you can also negate Called By, so that if you go like, I don't know, Ash or Max C, they can't actually Called By your Ash or Max C. That just makes it so good. But I still don't think it's like necessarily a 3 of. Like I usually run 2 Ghost Bell and I'm pretty happy with that. And they're often just so game changing. They're like activating Ghost Bell sometimes is just the best thing ever. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can put it in just base. I think it's actually just broken, even though this card in particular is not that big of a counter against Sprite. But it is in the sense that like it kind of helps to make sure your really good hand traps will resolve. So it's interesting. It's either at the top of A or at the bottom of S for me. And while we're at it, like let's just be honest here, like Max C, yes, against Sprite, but also just in general is super broken, right? Max C and Ash are like pretty much interchangeable here. Like I always say, if you're playing a combo deck, you probably, if you have to prioritize one, you probably want to play Ash over Max C, because negating Max C in a combo going first deck is way more important than activating it. But if you have space for both, which you normally should, you just run 3 of both. Like I think this is like the trifecta, like 3 Max C, 3 Ash, 2 Ghost Bell. This'll do a lot for you. Like activating Max C and they go Called By and you go Ghost Bell is so game winning against Sprite, because, well, depending on what you have in your deck, but just the fact that they do that and then you get to draw into your different outs, be it an Imperm or a Kaiju, a Lava Golem, or I think another card, it's not on here because it's not a hand trap, but I think Dark Ruler No More is a really, really important card to play right now as a really good out to Sprite. They put up too much and they have a lot of interruptions, and even after you go Dark Ruler No More, they're still maybe gonna have a Smashers set. So honestly, I think Dark Ruler No More, one of the best cards to play in this current format, even though it's not on this list because I'm just doing hand traps here. Keep in mind that for beating Sprite, you might want to run some Dark Ruler No Mores to draw into off of your Max C. It's really, it makes a difference. Now, next up here, we have Imperm, and I think Imperm is pretty much up here. The thing about Imperm that's so good is it kind of behaves like Veiler, except you can activate it on your own turn. You can activate it from your hand if you control no cards, right? But the one thing that makes it so incredible is that they can't Called By. They need to draw their 1-of cross out to stop your Imperm. And that just means like the odds of your opponent being able to stop Imperm are really low. You know, Ghost Bell won't stop Imperm, Called By won't stop Imperm. There's only one thing that's going to really stop Imperm if they're going first and you're going second, and that's the cross out. So just for that alone, I think Imperm just can't really go lower. Like, it's too good. Like, getting to negate a monster, even though it doesn't remove anything, it doesn't get you any card advantage, it does, like, it can really significantly hinder your opponent's plays. Like, going Imperm on Gigantic and they don't have the cross out, they can just call it a day. Of course, they could potentially set up a carrot before going Gigantic, so, you know, there's like... It is what it is. Usually they'll go red, however. Usually people will go red because there are many more monster hand traps that affect Sprite than there are trap ones. But for those people that went carrot when you had Imperm in hand, well, you know, you just Veiler. Just activate Veiler, you know? But yeah, I think like now that we talked about Imperm, I think Veiler, even though it's similar to Imperm, the fact that it can be Called By makes it worse, and also the fact that you can't use it on your own turn makes it kind of a brick on your own turn. So I'm kind of mixed on Veiler. I think it's still a really solid card, especially in this current format, especially the fact that it's not once per turn. So when they're like taking the Maxi challenge, for instance, because if Sprite doesn't take the Maxi challenge, they just kind of lose. So they kind of have to take it to an extent, like probably they'll go like set up maybe a red and a carrot, or maybe they'll go like elf and red engrave and a carrot on the field, or a starter's face down, something like that. So by them just taking that small Maxi challenge, you can draw into a couple copies of Veiler and interrupt a couple of things and really ruin their day, because it's not once per turn, and most of these hand traps are once per turn. So yeah, just that alone makes Veiler kind of a threat. So I think Veiler in A tier is a pretty fair spot for it. Now next up we have Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. Low-key, that has a lot of free space in the extra deck. You could play this card. I don't really want to put it up here, because if you do need those cards in your extra deck to resolve your Winter Cherries, that would mean you're not really playing the pots, or like you're just kind of like hoping you don't hit them with the pots. And this is really more of a card you would see in decks that are less combo focused, because most of those decks need pretty much their whole extra deck. So I'm kind of mixed on this one. I think I'm just gonna put it at like in pretty good, you know. I think it's a little bit better than Red Reboot right now, and you don't see a lot of people play it, but I think if you did, you'd be pretty fucking scared, because extra decks are pretty predictable right now. Like, realistically, if you ran this card, you could put like a Shishao, an Elf, a Gigantic, and I don't know, maybe like a Mirror Jade, and you'd pretty much have most like extra deck focused matchups covered. So it just depends on the deck you're playing. This is a weird one. You don't, again, you just don't really see this card see play, but I think it's actually quite good right now. And for the last one here, we have Gamma. So Gamma, it's really good. It's really solid. Of course, when its effect resolves, it is incredible, but also it's quite high risk. For one, you can brick on it. For two, it is pretty much completely dead if you're not going second, because you're going to have some setup on your field that makes it so you can't resolve this card. So I'm kind of mixed on this card. It's still really, like, it's a really good card. Like, I don't think it's just pretty good. It's definitely in base. I was just like, it's like when it resolves, it's up here, you know, like when it resolves, it's way up here, you know. But just considering every aspect of this card here, I don't think I can put it much higher than based, you know, like it's A tier. It's a really good hand trap though. And I'm kind of mixed on if it's above Veiler or under Veiler. I think I'm going to put it above Veiler, just because oftentimes if I have the choice between having a Gamma package and a Veiler, I'll choose the Gamma package, especially if I'm playing a deck with synchro monsters, because oftentimes, you know, you'll activate a spell that searches something, and then your opponent will, you know, it's a way to negate hand traps that isn't called by, so it can't be ghost belled. There's a lot of cool things about this card. Also, maybe you'll activate your starter if you're playing Sprite and your opponent is going to go Max C, and then you can go this and stop the Max C. So, you know, there's a lot of advantages to playing this card for sure. It's just, of course, there's risks to it as well. It's kind of a glass cannon card. So that's my tier list. These are pretty much, I think, all like the even remotely relevant hand traps in the game. If I forgot one, let me know, guys, but I'm pretty sure I didn't forget any. I even added some that are not really relevant, you know what I mean? But thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Make sure to subscribe. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the summer, and maybe 9,000 by my birthday on March 6th, but that's probably copium. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if I'm tripping. Also, don't forget, Kuriboh is the best hand trap in the game. It can save you from losing the game because you don't take any damage. Anyway, that's going to be it from me. Huge shout out to my UCT tier members. That would be Bargainman for 20, Dad Dude Joey, Hudaman me, Rightos, as well as B-Dubs and Hit or Miss JT. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the support, as well as everyone else supporting in the Miss tier, Baby tier over on Twitch, and you who's liking, commenting, doing all that stuff. Okay, I gotta go. Peace.